Today we're going to change out the motor in this fine looking Piko mogul. This is the motor itself. This is a new locomotive, but it started running rough and then it stopped running totally. The motor is pretty common and is available from Piko America and a number of dealers that sell parts for large-scale locomotives. The biggest part of the job is taking this locomotive completely apart. The cab has to come off, the front pilot has to come off, the boiler has to come off. Inside the boiler is a huge weight that has to come out, and then the chassis, the sort of running boards to the side of the boiler, that all has to come off. And when we get all that off, then the motor enclosure comes apart and we can get at the motor. The first thing we have to do is take off the cab, because the cab holds down or covers two screws that holds the boiler down. The cab itself is just held on by 4 screws on the bottom of the cab, or on the frame at the bottom of the cab, here, 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 and here. And what we also have to do is take the pilot off. It is held on by 2 small screws right here and right here. And the reason we have to take the pilot off is because the front of the boiler is held on by a screw that goes this way and can only be accessed with the pilot off. Next thing that comes apart is the smoke box front that just comes off. Just pull it out. Headlight wire, other wires that go to the non-existing smoke unit in this particular locomotive will pop out and lay around, but just when you put it back together, just stuff them all in there. Next, the boiler has to come off, and it's held on by 2 screws in the back, here and here. And now comes the tricky part. There is 1 screw. See if I can get it to show. Right here. And that has to come out. Once those 3 screws have been removed and the latch that sort of holds the front of the boiler is pushed in a little bit, the whole boiler will just sort of pop off like this. This large boiler weight is just held on by 2 screws that you can access through these large holes here and here. And when they're taken out, the boiler weight just lifts off. Okay, here we have removed the major components: the boiler, the cab, and the weight that's inside the boiler. And we have just the chassis left. All the wires have been moved to the back and tied off just to keep them out of the way. Let's go on to the next step. The running boards and the boiler support on the bottom are just held on by these 2 screws. One right here and one right here. Now the running boards and the boiler bottom is a single piece that just unclips and lifts off. Yes, it exposes the running gear, and now we have 2 more screws that I've already removed right here and here, and 2 in the back right here and here. And we can just lift off the back like this and set it aside. And now the whole drive mechanism sort of lifts up this cross brace right here and this, and what we can do is fold it back, and that exposes just the motor block. And now we have to uncover the motor, which is right inside of here. And one of the important things to note are these 4 little electrical pickups that stick up here at these points. The 2 outer ones are actually the pickups from the power pickups from the wheels and the skates that pick up power from the track, and the 2 inner ones are the power leads that go to the motor. Those 4 screws that we took out also loosen the cover, or allow the cover of this motor block to be taken off. And let's just pull it up. And this exposes the motor. And the way to get the motor out is to just get in here with the worm gears and pull it out. Of course, it's going to be tough. I found out it's going to be a little easier if we just take a small screwdriver and get it under the drive shaft of the motor here and gently pry the motor up at each end. And then the motor will come on out. And you'll notice that these 2 prongs here that come up from the motor are the ones that stuck up through the top cover plate. And of course, they are the power connections to the motor itself. Now, if you notice, there are 2 small holes in the bracket that holds the motor. They go in right here, and when you put the motor in, these vent holes or whatever you got have to go to the top, and that will ensure that the motor goes in the correct direction. And as what we're going to do now is gently lower the motor in to the same area, the new motor, and see if it's in those 2 prongs that go down into the holes. Okay, the motor is nestled in there. It looks like everything lines up well. But before we start closing everything up, let me just take a little grease and put it on the worms, on each worm need. I'm using a Label 601. It's safe for plastics, and it's designed for essentially this application. And we'll just put on just a little bit. And as the worm turns, it will spread onto the other gears as necessary. Too much grease tends to be a big problem. In fact, I have worked on a couple of locomotives recently, 2 of them, in fact, in which the oil and the grease, well, it was left in there for a long time, but there was a lot of it, and it had congealed to the point where it froze the motor, and had to take some solvents to get rid of it all. So anyway, keep that in mind when lubricating these motors. Okay, next is just to put this cover back on the motor itself, and the trick is to get these 4 prongs through these 4 holes that are indicated right along here. And let's see if we can sort of wiggle this in here and get these on where they belong. Yeah, it looks like it's lined up pretty well. So let's fold the drive mechanism back over. It should sit right here. And let's put the back part of the loco body right here. And let's put some screws into the rear here. Okay, I've hooked up a power supply through the umbilical in the back directly to the motor. Let's see how it runs. Yeah, it looks pretty good. There it is, about 12 volts the running speed of this locomotive. Crank it up to 16. That was pretty good. Now let's reverse the leads on the motor and see if it runs in the other direction. Okay. Looks good.